Hello, welcome to Writers on the Storm. I'm Paul Rogalis, and we're here today with legendary New Hampshire poet, storyteller, fiddler, dance caller, Dudley Laufman. Dudley's been writing and playing and fiddling for a long time now, and a couple of the awards he's won: National Heritage Fellowship in 2009, and in 2001 the New Hampshire Governor's Arts Award for Lifetime Achievement, which in New Hampshire is sort of like being knighted.
Yep.
So you can be Sir Dudley of New Hampshire. And you're going to play the fiddle, or you're going to play a song a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But first we're going to talk about writing, and then you're going to read some poetry. And this is the newest book, the latest book. This is the day we've been waiting for, and this just very recently came out.
Yeah.
Right? The last month or so.
Oh no, it came out. When was it came out? About? In June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that people would be able to get that online.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about writing in general first. There's an overlap. So you play the fiddle, you call dances, but you mix poetry in with your performances a lot. And do you think of as the poetry being a whole different process than music, or do they really go together for you?
They can't help it by being all one thing, but they are separate so far as I'm concerned. For a long time, and still do to some degree, earn my money as a musician and a square dance caller or a contra dance caller, and but they all started at about the same time. My interest in the poetry came when I had a friend who talked to me about Dylan Thomas, and so I started reading his things, and then. But I think the first poetry that I got interested in was a piece by Ernest Hemingway, and it was a segment from his book Death in the Afternoon, and it was in a poetry anthology. But that particular piece happened to be prose, but it was very lyrical, very musical. It was a typical Hemingway, green grass grows all around, and the green grass grows all around, that kind of thing. But I liked it because it didn't have the rules of rhyming and rhythm. And so a lot of my work is in what I call prose poem. But I will go back and forth because I like the lyrics too. And so one of my first books of poems was called Wind in the Timothy, and it was all very traditional lyrical poetry. And right now, I'd like to sort of get back into that, but I can't. Right, I'm having trouble with that. So right now, actually, I'm not doing any writing at this particular point. But the last batch of poems that I did were all prose poems. But I kind of like to get into the lyrical thing again, but I don't like to force it.
Right.
I can't stand forced rhymes, and I don't like doing inversions to make a rhyme. So anyway, so that's sort of on the back burner.
So I had a poet friend, and whenever he would get writer's block, couldn't write anything, he'd make himself write in a form like a sonnet, where there were a lot of rules for the lines, so that he wouldn't have to think so much about coming up with new ideas. He was more limited. So what can I write that'll fit in this rhyme scheme?
Yeah.
But with prose, with good prose, it's probably got a good rhythm to it anyway.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And do you remember when you first really thought of yourself as a poet? Like you just wrote a few poems, you liked it, you liked the whole process, it made you feel good, and you just thought, I'm going to do this forever.
Yeah, well, I didn't think about forever, but I did do it, And, I wrote a little pamphlet called I Hear Ringing Reels, and they were, for the most part, all prose poems, or prose songs, I called them. And it was based about the subject matter was the music and the dancing. So there's a definite connection there. But I never really have. I'm not a performer. I'm not a singer. I'm not a performer as far as that's concerned. When I do programs for Rhodes Scholars and elder hostels, I'll usually do some songs, and I'll usually do some poems. But I don't. I never think of them as part of what I do for connected to the music and the dancing. They just happen to work together. But
okay, yeah. And it probably, like, as far as being able to read a poem to a crowd, you're used to being in front of crowds.
Yeah.
And getting your voice to project and all that.
Yeah. The first poetry that I really got into, I became friends with Russell Banks, and he at the time was living in Northwood, New Hampshire. So I saw a lot of them, and he and Arthur Yarnoff, and then got to meet Bob Creeley and some of those guys. And Russell said something that I've always tried to stick by. He said poetry should be, you should tell the news. You should tell people something they didn't know before. And so I've always tried to do that, no matter whether it's a sonnet or a lyric or a prose poem. I want it to be, well, first of all, it's got to kick me in the butt. Mm-hmm. And then if I get it down on paper, it's got to do the same thing for the reader. So that's what I tried to follow. And the other thing I've always tried to follow is when I worked at New Hampshire Hospital, I worked in the occupational therapy department, and recreational therapy was part of that. And because it's not occupation as work, it's occupation as what you're doing. And the woman that I worked for, Eileen Dixie, said that when you take a movie onto the ward, and they'd be these old reel-to-reel movies, and you're showing them to the patients, and this may be the dozens, the 10th time you've seen this poem, but these patients are seeing it for the first time, and you've got to bring that enthusiasm into it. You've got to remember that more than 75% of the enjoyment of any activity is the anticipation of it, and that's held me in good stead right along through, not only through the poetry but also through the dances, the music and the dances.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's how vacations work, right?
Yeah, and I work a lot with children, and always running into teachers. We lose jobs at schools sometimes because the teachers want something new, and they forget that there's new students every year. And the old dancing masters in Scotland had that as a means. They didn't have to learn new dances all the time because they had new students. And
okay.
I've always stuck with that.
So when you write a new poem, do you edit it a lot? Do you write down a draft and then let it sit for a while, and then you come back and look at it and read it and see if it still sounds fresh?
For the most part, it's right off.
Yeah.
When it's done, it's done.
Okay.
I do some editing sometimes, and I'll show the poems to some other people, but usually it's first draft.
All right.
Yeah.
And you say that lately you haven't been writing much.
No, and it's okay.
Is it hard to? You can't really force yourself to write if it's not there.
No, I can't. But I'm thinking of doing some things, but and I'm thinking more in the terms of the lyrics, and but so far nothing. I'm pretty tied up with some surgery, health problems, and a few other issues that are just sort of getting in the way, and that's okay.
You don't really want to write about that.
No.
That wouldn't be a song.
No.
Okay, and do you want to read us a few of the newer poems that you've written?
Yeah.
And again, the book is This Is the Day We've Been Waiting For, poems by Dudley Laufman.
Yeah.
Do you have a few favorites?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll read a couple here and then some of the other.
Sounds good.
All right, well, this is a prose poem, and it's called M&Ms. You open a small package of M&Ms and dump them on the table, arranging them by color in separate piles: red, yellow, orange, blue, brown, and green. You start with the reds. You squeeze one. If it breaks, you eat it. You squeeze another. If it doesn't crack open or break, set it aside. Keep this up until you have eaten all the red ones except the winner, who doesn't break. You do the same with all the colors. Then you have a round robin between the winners. All of them play the others until you have a final winner. Then you eat it.
Nice.
IPH. Whenever I get up to bat, I always try to get an inside the ballpark home run. IPH. Triples are good, but I'd rather go for the IPH. I have 4 of them lifetime, all hit in Fenway Park. I played for the St. Louis Browns when I whacked the first one, hitting the edge of the wall in center field where the bleachers joined the left field green monster. It bounced way back onto the field, and I came home standing up. The next one, I was with the Red Sox then, was a sneaky hit pulled into the left field corner, sticking in the drain pipe there. It was a close call, me having to nosedive under the catcher. The third IPH came playing for the Washington Senators. A liner, inches over first base, landed fair, curved foul, caromed off the right field fence, rolled all the way to the bullpen. There was a drizzle. The ball in the field was slippery. Even so, I still had to slide for it. The last one was a doozer. I was back with the Browns again. It was an inside the infield homer, IIH. We had a man on second. I hit the first pitch, a low scorcher down the first base line, striking the first baseman on the ankle, bouncing off into the Bo Sox dugout, indeed rolling all the way down the passageway into the shower room. Of course, the first baseman was writhing on the ground, so the pitcher had to go after it. By the time he found it, the man on second had scored, and I had rounded third, headed home. He, the pitcher, tripped on the steps coming out, so the throw was just wide enough to allow me to score. Like I say, I like triples too. Actually, my IPHs are all triples stretched into homers. My triples, 758 lifetime, are all stretched doubles. One of them a grounder rule, which went under the garage door in center field. I don't do singles.
Nice. So you start off with a kind of a story, and then it turns into folklore.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you read any stories or novels by W.P. Kinsella?
No.
Sure,
yeah.
Because a lot of his stories are about baseball, and they kind of turn mythic too.
Yeah.
But that seems to be his favorite thing to write about.
Yeah. So this next poem has sort of become my signature piece, and this is from that book that was published by Beach River Books in Ossipee. And I get asked to do this one all the time.
It's one of your greatest hits.
Yeah. It's called How to Make a Semen Collector. You take a tractor 2-inch radiator hose about 2 feet long and a bicycle tire inner tube. You cut out a 3-foot section to slide down inside the hose, leaving 6 inches out at each end. At one end, fold the tube back over the hose, securing it with a rubber band. You do the same at the other end, but before you do, you pour some hot water, 100 degrees, between the tube and the hose and seal it in as above. Then you take your test tube and the rubber flange, slide it over one end and secure. Astrogade jelly up the other end. Now you're ready for the bull. When he goes to mount the cow, you slip the rig over his bedelia and Bob's your uncle.
That's great, and it's very useful.
Yeah.
A how-to sort of poem.
Now, I'm not sure whether they do it different, but that's how they taught me in Aggie school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've written about bulls a few times. You had a book called Bull.
Yeah, and then Bob Arnold, who runs the Longhouse Press, had that, and then I wrote another one called More Bull, and he put the two together.
Bull and more bull.
Yeah.
So you just can't get enough bull.
That's right. Here's one called, this is one of my favorite, where'd it go? And this was one of my earlier poems called In the Hammock. Westerly end hitched to an elm, sunrise end to a wooden post, my hammock swings in the generous host of the shade of late afternoon. I lie here in the cooling breeze, and through the slits of lazy eyes the undulating meadow flows to the distant maple row. I am dozing, but not long, comes the pad of bare feet among the ferns by the pebbled path. It is the children from their nap. Heidi and Bronwyn tumble in with me, their bare fat bodies still warm from sleep. They wiggle and giggle and say, "Let's go to England, Papa, today." One shove of the foot against the elm root, and we're off for old England in a cloth boat, sailing over the children's sea, so green with lush clover and tall timothy.
Nice. So there's a lot of different kind of styles in there. I mean, some of them just get a little bit get more exaggerated into almost myth, and then there's always kind of a like a homey, kind of personal.
Yeah, I always liked Robert Burns and Shelley, and in fact, like Burns enough to in January celebrate his birthday, what they call a Burns night. We have a haggis and whiskey and do the whole thing.
That sounds good. So do you write about family a lot?
Some.
But more like sort of like local characters?
Yeah. Published a whole book of stories in this little book here called, I didn't want to read anything from it, but it's called She's Plum Ned, She's More Plum. And those stories and poems come from the Monadnock region, down around Keene.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's more of a mix of stories and poems.
Yeah. So I wanted to read two two poems here that sent they're poems, they're prose poems, but they are connected to the music.
Okay.
All right.
And that might be a good setup. So two more poems, and then we can kind of move into, we're going to have a musical grand finale.
All right.
Poetry and music together.
Yeah. All right. How contra dancing was invented. It started off as a cash crop. Had to entertain them summer folk on Saturday night. Got Uncle Walter to show us the figures and steps of them old countries and quadrilles. We called them square dances. Hollis and Quint played their flute and fiddle. They'd get Arno on his guitar and go down to that abandoned cider mill. Had that brook running underneath it, smell of pumice and rotting wood. Sit there in the lantern light, pass a bottle around, play them old dance tunes with that great echo. Uncle Walter's nephew would sit in a dark corner. Couldn't see him, quiet fella. Surprised everyone by lilting out in his flute fiddle voice, chanting the changes to Hull's victory like he'd been doing it all his life. He was a natural. They pressed him into service at the very next dance. You know how the story goes from here, how the hippies came to the dances with their patchouli oil and bare feet, how they didn't like the word square, and how they discovered some were contras. We heard one of them tell someone, it's not square dancing, it's contra dancing. It's not square dancing, it's contra dancing. The rest is history, except there are still some of us old folk up here who like to say we're going to the square dance.
Nice. They're just as popular as ever, though, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Square dances and contra dances. And it seems like in the last 5 or 10 years, fiddle music has come back in.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
a lot of young people playing now.
Right, yeah. There's some pretty really popular bands now that are big. Fiddle is like sort of the big instrument in them.
Yeah. Fiddle Camps. Fiddlers Melly Dunham and George Overlock, Mainers of the First Hair, had about 30 tunes in their repertoire. Turkey in the Straw, Irish Washwoman, Soldier's Joy, Campbell's Are Coming, and like that. For the Contras, Lady of the Lake, Boston Fancy, Mountain Ranger, Haymakers. They swapped those tunes around for those dances to do the job. Then someone, Lord knows who, came across Cincinnati Hornpipe and Top of Cork Road Jig, and dances that went with them. More music was discovered, more dances, more people to play them. New tunes and dances written like McCullen's Squeezebox, Nantucket Sleigh Ride, which made for an enormous surplus of music and dances, which then necessitated the advent for the use of medleys, 3 tunes or more per contra. But even so, there was not enough days in the week for them to play all the music for all the dances, so the need for fiddle camps arose, followed by dance camps in organic farms to feed them all, and now everyone is a fiddler, dancer, farmer, or all of the above at once, and nobody has time to do anything else like go to war or shit like that.
Nice. It's a good one to lead into our grand finale song. You want to set up for this? We're going to have some music. You're going to have a poem that leads into a song with accordion and fiddle.
Yeah.
And you have your whole band with you now.
Yeah. So this is a poem. It's called Fife Tune. It's written by John Manifold, who is a folklorist and a songwriter from Australia. And so we have a tune, Lindsay and myself have a tune that we play that is a fife tune, and it's called The Moon and Seven Stars. So because it's a fife tune, we're going to use it to, and then I'm going to read the poem. I'm going to recite the poem, fife tune. And in the direction, or in the title, when you see the poem fife tune written out, in the subtitle it says 6/8 time for such and such platoon, which really marks it as a musical piece. So
okay, and your fiddle player is Lindsay.
Lindsay Holden.
Lindsay Holden, who also did the cover for your latest book.
Yeah,
which is beautiful.
So why don't we play the tune A B one time through, and then I'll recite the poem, and then we can play it again. All right. One morning in spring we marched from devises, all shapes and all sizes like beads on a string. And yet with a swing we trod the blue metal and full of high fiddle we started to sing. She ran down the stair, a 12-year-old darling, laughing and calling and tossing her hair, then silent to stare at the men flowing past her. They were all she could master, adoring her there. It's seldom I'll see a sweeter or prettier, as seldom will think her in 2 years or 3. And lucky he'll be, she takes, for I love her, while we are far over the treacherous sea.
Nice. That was cool. That was great. So if people want to go to one of your dances that you're calling, are they mostly private functions, or are they able to find it?
Well, they're public as well as private. And I have a website, dudleylaufman.com.
Dudleylaufman.com.
So the schedule's on there. But there's also another website called Contra Dance New Hampshire. Is that what it is?
Contra Dance Links.
Contra Dance Links. And that tells where all the dances are throughout the state, plus some in Vermont, some in Maine, some in Massachusetts. So there's a dance every night of the week in Boston. And in New Hampshire, there's one every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, that you can go to.
But when people see the show, they're going to look for you.
Yeah,
You're like the rock star of contra dancing.
But I'm in sort of bad odor with some of the more modern type. I'm a very old-fashioned traditional dancers, and they're not. But we still do them.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it sounds fun. I mean, we got a taste of it, and so this has been great. And Lindsay, thanks for coming in. Dudley,
all right,
thank you so much. And the newest book, This Is the Day We've Been Waiting For, by Dudley Laufman. But you have a lot of books that are out there. Some of the older ones might be harder to find, but probably 10 or so anyway, right?
8, I think.
8?
8 or 9, yeah. Are we on the air now still?
Sure.
We are, my word. Well, I was going to read one of these from, this book is called Bull and More Bull. And so it's naming the cows.
Okay.
Back in the day, 10 cows was enough. You could name them all. Carol, Christmas, Buttercup, Chocolate, Daisy, like that. Then with the advent of bulk tanks, you had to have 30 cows or more to fill the tanks. Became harder to name the cows. There was Greenfield Farm, almost in downtown Lexington, Swenson Brothers, milking 200, maybe more. Used a tape measure around the cow's middle. If she fell beneath a certain weight, meant she would be put more feed into gaining weight than into making milk. So off to Brighton to become Hamburger, and us up to Quebec for hay and a few replacement heifers. Tried to name over 100 cows. Like Forbes up there in Colebrook, 1,500 milkers. They have numbers. The Luke is milking 60. They all have numbers, but he's got 4 boys who like to name the girls. There's 21 Loon and her sister 22 Luna, both red and white ash ears with curling horns. 101 Butter, Beach with a bell. 2 Icarus the bull. 30 Buddy the other bull, both good goalies. Number 9 Ted Williams for 1 week, then she becomes Maurice Bouchard, and then after that Gordie Howe, and how could I forget 4 Isha, number 4 Bobby Orr.
Nice. That's a good way to end. And then if you had trouble sleeping and you don't want to count sheep, you can just try to name 1,000 bulls.
That's right.
That'll put you to sleep,
right.
probably.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming up.
Okay.
The Writers on the Storm. And look for Dudley's books online, and look for Dudley at Contra Dances. Thanks for watching Writers from the Storm. We'll have another episode sometime soon. Thanks.